We are in the building. Happy Tuesday. I hope everyone's week is going well. We are about to get started. I like jumping on maybe like 3 minutes early just to kind of get my bearings. But it's like once you click the live, it doesn't matter if you jump in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes early, like you're pretty much on. So yeah, we have quite a bit to cover today. A lot of boxing to get into. Hope everyone is well. First, I do want to recap some of last weekend's action, where we had Derek Chisora versus Chisora-Pulev 2. We also had Mark Magsayo versus Ray Vargas. That was for Magsayo's WBC featherweight title. I also want to get into WBA announcing or ordering Dimitri Bivol to defend his WBA belt against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. We want to talk a little bit Jake Paul, Hasim Rahman Jr. Also a little Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu news. We also have Bam Rodriguez, who was just added to the Canelo versus Triple G3 undercard. He's going to be taking on contender Israel Gonzalez. I want to talk a little Teofimo Lopez and the return of Teo versus Pedro Campa coming up in early August. We've got Adrian Broner news. Adrian Broner about to take on Omar Figueroa. We have a couple previews to get through. One of those being, of course, Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. And then we also have Ioka versus Donnie Niedes. That's actually taking place early tomorrow morning. So the fight's taking place, I believe, in Japan. So on the West Coast, for instance, it's going to be, I would say the main event is probably going to start sometime between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. So that's going to be an early one tomorrow morning. That one's for Ioka's title. As I said, we're going to talk a little Jake Paul versus Rahman 2 as well. I want to talk about Floyd Mayweather's comments regarding Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson and how I interpret that in terms of what we could expect or not expect when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis's upcoming fights. I also want to talk just briefly on Roger Gutierrez versus Hector Garcia. That's going to be for one of those titles down at 130. And also want to talk about a new show that I'm going to kick off with my boy Robert Reese tomorrow. Kind of undecided on what to call it at this point. I think we're going with Box Office or The Box Office. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's going to be a collaboration with Hot Facts with Robert Reese. But let's see. Check. So first, I want to kick off with some Derek Chisora versus Chisora-Pulev 2 talk. This was a very exciting fight, which I think most people anticipated. We knew that we were going to get a lot of action. I feel like the public was kind of torn on who they thought was going to win this one. We know that Derek Chisora fights a lot of close fights. Sometimes he sort of muddies the water because of his relentless style. It's kind of tough to tell. Even if he appears to be doing most of the work or majority of the work, sometimes it's tough to tell who's actually throwing the more effective punches. So I thought that, the decision, if this was indeed to go to decision between he and Pulev, that it was in fact going to be close. And yes, it was very close. It was a split decision win. And Derek Chisora, unlike many of his other fights where he often comes out on the short end of the deal, you could see the relief on his face when they announced the scorecards and that, when Derek Chisora won via decision. I was really surprised at a lot of the body work that he was doing. You could tell watching these two fighters how old they were by pretty much looking at their legs. And sometimes even if you're still throwing fast punches, just hand speed wise, you could tell that a fighter is 38 years old in the case of Derek Chisora, or 41 years old in the case of Pulev, by looking at the movement. So Derek Chisora, even though he keeps on coming forward, throwing a two-fisted attack to the body, you'll see that he'll then kind of stumble back into the ropes, and then he'll kind of invite Pulev to come back in, because he's not going to do a ton of walk across the ring and chase you. He's not going to, he's too old for that. And Pulev, it looked like, was too old to get out of the way of Derek Chisora's two-fisted body attack. Yes, Derek Chisora was also coming over the top with a lot of those right hands, but he would throw a clubbing left followed by a right, and he would do this time and time again throughout the 12-rounder versus Pulev. And again, Pulev is 41 years old, so he wasn't going to show a lot of lateral movement to get out of the way of most of those punches. And I think that him absorbing so many of those body shots made it easier for Derek Chisora to then land a lot of vicious clubbing right hands over the top. Again, it's anybody's opinion on who deserved that decision between Chisora and Pulev, but one thing was clear, you know, and that was really their age. Even though they were both throwing a lot of punches, you know, Derek Chisora at the end of the fight was calling out Deontay Wilder. I'm thinking, with as off balance as you are, you being Chisora, when you throw certain punches or combinations, you could tell that a younger, a skilled, certain fighters will be able to sidestep that and hit Chisora with many more clean shots. And if you have the punching power of a Deontay Wilder, I just do not see a Wilder-Chisora fight going well for Derek Chisora at all. I feel like he would get sniped pretty devastatingly. Gerardo Reyes, what's going on? Thanks for coming through. He said, I had Chisora by knockout. So, never thought he would win by decision, but hey, that's boxing. Yeah, so here's the thing with Chisora, though. I feel like whether we're talking about his first fight with Joseph Parker, his fight several years ago versus Robert Helenius, even his fight against Alexander Usyk, and his first fight with Dillian White, I feel like because of his fight style, a lot of the rounds that Derek Chisora is in, even though he's so often head over skis going after his opponent, it's tough to decide who, or to judge who won the round in a Derek Chisora fight, because on one end, he's coming forward throwing a lot of punches, so it's almost like, are you going to award the skill on for his opponent, or are you going to award the will in Derek Chisora continuously coming forward, throwing these punches that, you know, sometimes they land, more often than not? Well, he's actually fairly accurate. He is pretty accurate. But yeah, Chisora by knockout, that would have been interesting, because, you know, Pulev has only lost twice, and it was to Vladimir Klitschko and then to Anthony Joshua. So I actually look at Pulev as being a pretty durable fighter. Chisora does hit hard, but and sometimes when we think about Chisora's style, we kind of envision him and picture him kind of being like just like a rampage style fighter, where he's aggressive and he's big, build wise he's big. But in this fight between Chisora and Pulev was the big guy. You know, Pulev was 6'4" to Chisora's 6'2", and he probably outweighed him by, I don't know, maybe like 10 pounds or something. Pulev is a big dude. So, yeah, Chisora by knockout. I would have been pretty surprised by that. I thought that it was going to be a really muddy fight to call. Hey, Benny Bronx, what's going on? Hey, I have a question to ask you, Benny Bronx. If you are into hip-hop, and I'm assuming you're from the Bronx, do you have any favorite Bronx MCs? I was thinking KRS-One. I believe Big Pun is from the Bronx. But yeah, let me know what you think. If you are, in fact, a hip-hop fan, and who you dig, you know, coming out of the BX. But yeah, Derek Chisora versus Pulev 2, that it pretty much gave us all of the action. I do think that is a fight of the year contender. I still think that Lee Wood versus Michael Conlan, in my opinion, is the best fight. I also think that Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano 2 was a great fight. But Chisora versus Pulev 2, I think that should be up there. And then we obviously had Mark Magsayo versus Ray Vargas for Ray Vargas's WBC featherweight title. I'm sorry, for Magsayo's WBC featherweight title. And this is the one that he had won off of Gary Russell Jr. I feel like a lot of people who were gung-ho off of Mark Magsayo, it was more based on what could be versus what we have actually seen from him to date. Because you could look at, even the fight where he knocked Julio Ceja clean out. You could look at that fight and see flaws in, the sweet science aspect of Mark Magsayo's game. And then obviously against Gary Russell Jr., the fact that after a few rounds and after it was evident that Gary Russell had injured himself, that Mark Magsayo wasn't able to take full advantage of that and to demonstratively win the rounds beyond that point. It was still a pretty close fight even after that. Benny Brock says, in response to the hip hop related question, said Biggie, Pun, Slick Rick, yes, KRS-One, Jay-Z, Nas, etc. Yeah, many, too many. I feel you. Mark Magsayo was showing some of these flaws, and Ray Vargas, my concern for Ray Vargas going into this fight against what do we know about Mark Magsayo? He hits hard and he's got pretty quick punches. I've found his rhythm to be a little bit predictable. Like he has certain tells before he lets his punches go. I feel like the conditions need to be a certain way, need to be clear for him to feel comfortable letting his punches go. And Ray Vargas fights at a pace where he kind of takes that consideration and he takes that decision making out of his opponent's hands. I feel like Ray Vargas sort of dictates the pace. He's almost always going to be the taller and longer fighter. Even at 122, the guy's 5'10 and a half. So now stepping up to 126, still has the reach advantage, still has the height advantage, moves pretty well. But he's also somebody who, and this was my concern with him, he will keep his head over the pocket sometimes. Like when he throws double and triple hooks, when he throws combinations that are almost exclusively to the body, I feel like he puts himself in harm's way, where if you could time it correctly, and if you could take that extra step into the pocket to let another 2 or 3 punches go, you could catch him pretty cleanly. And, Mark Magsayo, to his credit, hit Ray Vargas a lot during this fight. About the knockdown, how do I feel about the knockdown? I feel like Ray Vargas kind of stepped into it. He was off balance, so it wasn't like it didn't seem like a detach you from your senses type of punch, but it was a legit knockdown. He was stepping in a way where it wasn't going to take much to take him off of his feet. And I felt like I could tell by the way that Ray Vargas got up and started to hold and move a little bit awkwardly. Usually he's a pretty smooth mover. I thought that he was a little bit awkward for the 30 seconds to a minute following the knockdown, which had me thinking, is he in bigger trouble than I thought he was in? So, he obviously survived it well, but I thought that he was pretty hurt. Not hurt to the point where where you've got concerns beyond that round. If he makes it out of the round, granted, you don't want to get hit by another one of those. But, I thought that he has shown this survival ability before. When Ray Vargas fought against Hovhannissian had him tagged a few times, and I thought that Ray Vargas was in trouble. But again, his height and length make it so that he's able to kind of escape dangerous situations pretty smoothly. Let's see what we have in the comments. Hot facts with Robert Reese. What's going on? I had said it in the beginning of the hour. Hot facts with Robert Reese and I are actually doing a show tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I'm going to speak a little bit about that a little bit later on. But it's going to be a collaborative show that we're giving a shot. To answer your question, Rob, I've played with the studio a little bit. Haven't done the different titles and so forth. But I was actually thinking about doing that for this particular session, using some of that. I plan on doing that next week. Benny Bronx said, "Woog, Mark Magsayo costed me." He had a parlay with Chisora on the plus 220 with Magsayo at a plus 100. So you should have hollered at me, man. I thought we talked last week on the chat. I was actually going with Ray Vargas via close decision. But I did pick Chisora-Pulev, so it's not like I would have won that two fight parlay either. I thought that Chisora-Pulev, like many of Chisora's opponents, was gonna come out with a close decision win over Chisora. And then I thought Ray Vargas was going to win the close fight. GM George, this is my boy. We shot so many different concerts. One of my best homies, GM George, thanks for coming through. Yeah, we from like 2014 to 2017, we shot so many different hip hop, punk rock concerts all throughout the Southland, Orange County, LA County. We had the 2 cameras ready. We edited a lot of the footage. We're both like just diehard music junkies, and he's also a huge MMA fan. So I mean, we could talk MMA like all day long. And I go to his house a lot for some of the MMA UFC pay-per-views. Thanks for coming through, GM George. He asked, could Mike Tyson beat Hulk Hogan in a wrestling match? I think Jake Paul beats them both in wrestling and boxing. How about that? Gerardo Reyes. I thought that he was I thought he was in trouble. And I was thinking, is Ray Vargas ready to step up at 126? And is he still going to be formidable? Because, he was a hard hitter, at 122, but he wasn't like a devastating knockout artist. He was an accumulating puncher, right? So he would just wear you out. And even in his volume and his height and his overall punch output, he still wasn't getting guys out of there. Like, he had won his last, 6 or 7 fights via decision at 122. So I had some big questions about him then stepping up to 126 and seeing how his power would translate. I think he's still a hard enough puncher to be effective, obviously, but I was wondering also, how is that skinny frame going to take a proper 126-pound punch from a guy like Mark Magsayo? And, did he take it super well? No, he was clearly hurt. But, there were other hard punches that he got hit with in that fight that he took a lot better than that one that dropped him. So, a lot is to be learned, I think, with his next couple of fights. And I want to leave it to you guys on this one. Who do you guys want to see Ray Vargas fight next? Obviously, I mean, my number 1 pick would be Emmanuel Navarrete. He is, to me, the best fighter at middleweight. But if not him, and it probably won't be that, because Navarrete is with Top Rank, fights on ESPN. Ray Vargas is with PBC, often fights on Showtime or Fox. But if not Emmanuel Navarrete, and I'm going to assume that it's not going to be anybody on the DAZN side, meaning Lee Wood, the lesser belt holder of the WBA title. We saw him take it from Zhu Khan and then defend it in what I believe to be the fight of the year versus Michael Conlan. I don't think it's going to be Lee Wood because of the whole DAZN PBC thing. And I don't think it's going to be Josh Warrington, the now 2-time IBF champion. So that leaves us with who? If we're talking about really top players at 126. Leo Santa Cruz, if you think he could still fight at an elite level at 126. I'm not too sure about that. But it would either be Leo Santa Cruz or I guess it wouldn't be Mauricio Lara either, which wouldn't that would be awesome, wouldn't it? Ray Vargas versus the knockout artist Mauricio Lara, who knocked, Josh Warrington clean out. But on the undercard, yes, Gerardo Reyes, I just saw you say it. I thought Figueroa was next. But Vargas obviously wants a bigger fight, right? A bigger name. He wants to fight the legend, which will probably be an easier fight for him, I think. Leo Santa Cruz. But yeah, Brandon Figueroa, in the way that he performed against Carlos Castro I think it was both of their 126-pound debuts. Figueroa, obviously, former belt holder at 122, lost that title in a razor-thin decision that could have gone either way versus Stephen Fulton. So I was really curious how another tall fighter for the division, not as tall as Ray Vargas, but a tall, long fighter that just kind of drapes over his opponents with his fight style and just never stops coming and throwing punches. Brandon Figueroa, I was wondering how he was going to do. And yes, I would really like to see how Ray Vargas handles that type of pressure because, Figueroa, unlike Mark Magsayo, where I feel like if you could out-sweet science him, it's almost like you could put Mark Magsayo in a state where he looks like he's thinking too much and he's like unsure about when to collapse the pocket. Brandon Figueroa, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He's going to be in your chest and on you. So I want to see how Ray Vargas deals with that. I've seen him fight aggressive fighters before. It ends up being a slugfest, an intelligent slugfest, and again, Ray Vargas will throw like triple hooks where he'll go like 2 to the body and then 1 up top. He'll really mix it up. But, I wouldn't be mad if they make that fight. I think that would be a very entertaining title defense for Ray Vargas. Yeah, Gerardo Reyes said, Ray has been able to escape from a couple close calls. Yeah, that's why it didn't surprise me when he got back up and finished the fight boxing on his back foot. Yeah, he knows how to adjust, and he knows how to adjust mid-flight. So like there's certain fighters where they can game plan before the fight starts, but once you see them in the actual fight, it's like they have more difficulty flipping the switch and altering their game plan. I mean, obviously Floyd Mayweather is one of the greatest we've ever seen at that. Certain fighters are very good at that. Not Mark Magsayo, but Ray Vargas has some of those elements as well, where you'll see him fight a certain way for like a minute and a half of a certain round, and then he'll totally switch it and fight on his back foot, or vice versa. You see a lot of that. So Benny Bronx said, oh, I'm sorry. First, okay, we'll come back to the GM George question. Benny Bronx asked or said, Manny Pacquiao told Magsayo, cut the ring off, use your jab, and he didn't do either. Yeah, with that, and look, and this is another thing. I feel like because, Mark Magsayo's Filipino, that a lot of, fans of Magsayo want to see some of like, and also because he's trained by Freddie Roach, Manny Pacquiao's longtime trainer, they want to see some of the ingredients that make for the Manny Pacquiao recipe. It's apples and oranges. Yes, Mark Magsayo has good, fast hands, and yes, he hits very hard. But if you look at Manny Pacquiao, especially young Pacquiao, look at his entry points. Look at what he's doing with his feet to be able to hop in and then hop out. There was nobody in the game with legs and feet that worked like Manny Pacquiao. So, for Manny Pacquiao look, this is good advice that Pacquiao's imparting on Magsayo. But to then have the wherewithal and the ability to carry it out, maybe if they were working on it throughout the entire training camp, maybe you could ask more from Magsayo. But Manny Pacquiao's, ability to move laterally, right? Because that's what cutting the ring off entails. Instead of following the guy, where when the guy's moving this way, you're just kind of tracing him around the ring and giving him all the space to work with. When you're properly cutting the ring off, you're starting to move this way. And unless somebody's been really, really training to do that, you see that it's not, you would think that this is like a fundamental thing that everybody should have, because they're professional fighters. So of course you need to be able to move laterally. But it really surprises me how many fighters have trouble with the concept of, no, don't take 2 steps forward and then 1 step diagonally. Take 1.5 steps just straight laterally and then come in at an angle. Yeah, you're right. Mark Magsayo wasn't doing any of that, nor was he using his jab, which was really weird because, he was throwing right hand leads, right? It's almost like he was trying to time Ray Vargas and then let a right hand go and just look for those big opportunities. I don't know at what point of the fight he threw the whole jab part of the playbook out of the window. I don't know if there was something about Ray Vargas' style or his pursuit, the way that he would kind of flip the switch between coming at Mark Magsayo to then moving around and making Magsayo chase him a bit. I don't know if there was something like that was throwing Magsayo off to where Magsayo didn't want to let the jab go, or if it was Ray Vargas' height and length and the fact that if Mark Magsayo reached for the jab, or with the jab, because who else did we recently see reaching with jabs and just kind of floating jabs out there that were non-consequential? It was Joe Smith Jr. when he fought Beterbiev. And if you throw a jab out there and it's not a purposeful jab, I just feel like with certain opponents, the get back is too severe to even run that risk. So maybe that's why Mark Magsayo stopped throwing jabs, because if he floats one out there, then, Ray Vargas could slip, because Ray Vargas can collapse the pocket pretty quickly and then let a couple left hands go, his lead left hand. So, yeah, Mark Magsayo did so many of the wrong things in this fight. And I want to also leave this question for you guys. Do you want to see Mark Magsayo stay with Freddie Roach, or do you think he would be better off going elsewhere? And I'm not saying that this loss should be laid on the, both trainer and fighter are culpable in almost all scenarios. But you would expect a little bit more of a technician, being that he's been trained by Freddie Roach for some time now, right? I mean, some have been more technical than others, but Freddie Roach, he's one of those top tier trainers who has the reputation. GM George asks, real question, is Jake Paul's new opponent legitimate? Yes. And we're going to get into some Jake Paul talk. And I want to ask you guys, do you guys, stay with Roach, Benny Bronx says. Okay. With Jake Paul, and I'm not going to talk too much Jake Paul, but I feel like it's the elephant in the room that has to be discussed, at least on some level, especially now that he's fighting a professional fighter. We've seen him go through the, Nate Robinsons, Anderson Gibbs, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, and every time he took to the ring, he being Jake Paul, it was another step up, right? You go from a non-athlete YouTuber to a professional athlete, but a hooper, an undersized hooper who was famously small, 3-time slam dunk contest winner, Nate Robinson, and everybody was pretty shocked when Jake Paul put his lights out, right? Like, we can't lie that that wasn't some entertaining, scary television. So he went from that to fighting Ben Askren, who, yes, is a professional fighter, but he's about as bad as you get in the natural stand-up. Like, if you watch some of his MMA fights, and granted, Ben Askren was undefeated for several years. He's a one champion, and he was a former Bellator champion. He had beaten Douglas Lima. He beat Robbie Lawler when he came to the UFC. Legitimate fighter. Like, he didn't lose until he got kicked in the head by Jorge Masvidal. So that was like a big step up for Jake Paul, right? But then Ben Askren, again, when it comes to the hands and especially with the boxing, he's the type where, like, you see him like start to train, he comes to practice, and then, he's like, you toss him the gloves, hey, put these on. And then, he comes back and it's like, they're on the wrong hands, Ben. Like, he really doesn't have any boxing wherewithal, and it showed. He got face planted against Jake Paul. And then after that, then we see him fight a MMA fighter, but a striker in Tyron Woodley. So then it's like, wait a second. I've seen Tyron Woodley knock Robbie Lawler out. I've seen Tyron Woodley go a hard 5 rounds with, a stand-up genius in Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. We know Tyron Woodley has hands, right? But yes, he also has the threat of a takedown and everything else that goes into MMA. But then we saw what Jake Paul did over the course of 2 fights versus Tyron Woodley. So now, after that point, he promised, and by the way, let's not discount how dramatic that knockout was in the rematch. I mean, my God. And you know what? The knockout saved the day. That was one of the most boring fights in this whole celebrity fighter, in this recent run of celebrity-style fights. This was one of the most boring fights we've had yet. The rematch, not the first fight between Jake Paul and Woodley. That one was all right. The rematch got dreadfully boring to where even the commentators are talking about how uneventful this fight is. TJ, what's going on? Thanks for coming through, man. Yeah. And so once, it gets into the middle rounds, and then we see, Jake Paul kind of show his hand. He dipped low, looked low, threw high. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, but he dipped low, threw high, and it led to one of the most dramatic knockouts, whether you're talking professional fighting, professional boxing or not. It was dramatic, and Tyron Woodley was clean out. And yes, Tyron Woodley was coming off of a 5-fight losing streak that ended his MMA career, but it was only like the last 2 of those where he got stopped. One via injury after getting pummeled on the ground mostly by Colby Covington, and then getting stopped in the first round by Vicente Luque. But all that to say, now Jake Paul, he was going to fight a professional in Tommy Fury who has even less experience than the replacement Hasim Rahman. So we get a couple things in this Hasim Rahman Jr. opponent. We get somebody who, one, is actually Jake Paul size. We've only seen Jake Paul fight smaller guys. Tyron Woodley's professional MMA career was mostly at 170. Jake Paul, fights at about 190 to 200, probably walks around at like 205, 210, or maybe even a little bit more. But Woodley was like 170. Ben Askren was 170. I've seen Hasim Rahman Jr. fighting at like 225, 230. This is a big guy. So Jake Paul's about 6 feet, 6'1". Hasim Rahman Jr. is 6'3", so he's fighting a big guy, a heavyweight, and he's fighting an actual boxer who has 13 professional fights to his name. No, it's not against the upper echelon of the boxing world, but like everybody says, there's levels to this, right? And so I think that this is a dramatic step up for Jake Paul, to the point where like I'm almost wondering, and I'm not gonna allege anything that I have no evidence to substantiate, but like I'm wondering, is there a fix in? Because how big of a step up it is between Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley in a boxing fight versus somebody who, I remember watching one of those Floyd Mayweather All Access episodes that they had like they were showing the Mayweather gym, and usually they cut the cameras when they have a sparring session, but they extended this one a little bit. It was either All Access or 24/7. It was 2014, so I think Floyd was in his Showtime deal, so I think it was All Access on Showtime. But they showed the footage of a long sparring session that involved Hasim Rahman Jr. And this is way back in 2014. So, at one point, he hasn't been as active lately, but this is somebody who was like actively pursuing a professional boxing career for years. And his dad was a former heavyweight champion, knocked out Lennox Lewis famously, and then got knocked out in return. But Hasim Rahman was fighting the who's who of the heavyweight division for several years. Everybody from like the Chris Burrs to the John Ruizes to Evander Holyfield. He fought them all. He fought David Tua twice. I think he either fought a draw or even beat David Tua once. But yeah, Hasim Rahman, the real deal. Hasim Rahman Jr., EK, what's going on? Thanks for coming through. But all that to say, I think that Hasim Rahman Jr. is a major step up for Jake Paul. And I'm not sure who I think wins this fight. I think that if this is really on the up and up, and it's really one of those non-fix, let's let the best man win, this could be Hasim Rahman. This could be a bad miscalculation for Jake Paul. But the money that's involved makes me kind of think maybe, I don't know. I don't want to allege any like foul play, financially or ethically on this. But hey, if Jake Paul's really fighting Hasim Rahman Jr. and if Hasim Rahman Jr., there is a rehydration clause, which means that Hasim Rahman Jr. has to come down to weigh in at 200 and then can't gain more than 15 pounds by the time it's fight time. So he can't like come into the ring at 225 after weighing in at 200. And I'm already hearing Hasim Rahman Jr. basically making a kind of an excuse of sorts, saying, you're going with the rehydration clause. And, it sounds like that's a big concern for Team Rahman. So, because of that, I might slightly favor Jake Paul. And I know that these guys have sparred in the past and they've worked out together, but this is a major step up for Jake Paul. I don't want to get that twisted. Benny Bronx wants a rematch for Magsayo. You think that the next fight for Jesse Vargas should be a rematch versus Mark Magsayo? Gerardo Reyes says, I thought okay, yeah, my bad. I already read that one. Gerardo, yeah, you wanted to see the Navarrete one too? Or the, I think that's what you were referring to right here. Robert Reese says KRS-One. That's hearkening back to my question for Benny Bronx about Bronx rappers and MCs in general. Stay with Roach. Yeah, Benny Bronx says. Jimmy Rabit, Rabbi, please let me know how to pronounce that one. Rabit? Rabit. First of all, thanks for coming through, Jimmy. Says Ben Askren is a great guy. He seems like a nice guy, and he's got a sense of humor too. I'm surprised that I guess I'm not surprised that he took the fight, given what the MMA fighters get paid versus what Askren got paid versus Jake Paul. So, and he got tagged. People were looking at that saying, oh, he took a dive. They were saying that about Tyron Woodley. I'm like, did you not see how hard that glove contacted with that face? TJ says, who do I have for Ioka versus Nietes tomorrow and how? So Ioka is a title holder down at 115. He's about to fight a 40-year-old and a two-time champion, Donnie Nietes. This fight is taking place in Japan, so it's going to be super early, especially here on the West Coast. It's going to be like at 4, 5 o'clock in the morning at the time the main event starts. On this one, I'm actually going Ioka. If we were talking a prime Donnie Nietes, who, has won majority of his recent fights. I mean, look at the guy's record. He still has, only one loss in his entire career. He's actually been one of the most understated, remarkable boxing careers in recent memory. It's almost disgusting how under-discussed Donnie Nietes is. Like, he's had a phenomenal career, but it's one of those things where I was talking about this last week with Bam Rodriguez and what his ascension means to the lower divisions, especially if he could get in there with Chocolatito or somebody. But there's such little attention paid to the divisions. Basically, anything below from 126 to 135. So you're talking 122, which now has Stephen Fulton, Brandon Figueroa. Used to have Guillermo Rigondeaux, which his fight style didn't help really attract eyeballs, even though he was like a boxing savant, Guillermo Rigondeaux. But especially when you get to 118, which has the killer, the monster, Naoya Inoue, who just knocked out Nonito Donaire in their rematch. Devastating fighter, one of the best pound for pound in the sports. Yeah, Stan Tucker's in the house, aka Dad. Yeah, 4 a.m. Yikes. I'll hold off on texting you about it, right? But yeah. So there's very low visibility in those lower divisions, and that is basically why most of us haven't heard of Donnie Nietes. But really good fighter, long career. He's now 40 years old. Just look at his track record. You could pull up a Wikipedia or a box rec. 2-time champion, or he might even be a 3-time champion. But yeah, I believe he still only has one loss in his career, and he's about to challenge for Ioka's title. And I'm still not sure who is airing this fight. Because sometimes with these lesser known fights, even title fights, if there's very little visibility or attention paid to the fight in the States or in the UK, it's sometimes like a last minute bid to see who can air the fight. So it's either probably going to be DAZN or ESPN. I'm going to guess ESPN. I might not even find out until later tonight where this fight's being aired. If you guys know the answer to that, please let us know in the comments. But I'm not sure who's airing the fight. But my guess would be ESPN, and I'm taking Ioka, and I think I'm going to take Ioka via decision. I mean, look, 40 years old is 40 years old, especially in those lower, lighter divisions. Yeah, TJ took Ioka on points, minus 140. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad bet. I'm actually a little surprised that the odds are that close. Gerardo Reyes so this is the rematch. Thanks for pointing that out. And Ioka lost via decision to Nietes in the first time. So again, Donnie Nietes is no joke, and Gerardo Reyes is taking Nietes by decision again. And then TJ says that the Jake Paul Rockman Jr. card is going to get scrapped. So I saw the report about that, about Rockman Jr. arguing about his contract. I think that was just a last-minute flex. But here's the thing. If he messes this fight up because of contract negotiations, he's not going to get this opportunity again. And let's keep it real. He's not going to get anything near this opportunity anywhere else. So I think it's one of those things where, like if you get hired for a job and then you start negotiating the stuff, well, first of all, you don't start negotiating your contract after you show up to work. So I hope he doesn't miscalculate there. But I think that they're playing a little bit of hardball, assuming that Jake Paul doesn't have any more backup plans, because Hasim Rahman Jr. is already a backup plan to Tommy Fury. So I think he's anticipating that Jake Paul doesn't have a backup plan to the backup plan and trying to like squeeze out some more money. I don't think it's gonna blow up the fight though. I really don't. And they had their face off today. Some pretty good trash talk, by the way. And Hasim Rahman Jr. more than held his own trash talk wise for against Jake Paul. But yeah, I don't think that the fight's gonna get scrapped, and I think they're gonna that the show will go on. That's just my guess though. But yeah, the weight issue might be significant. It's going to be very hard, I think, for Hasim Rahman to come all the way down to 200 flat. TJ saying Nietes via decision. Damn, okay. And TJ said that he thought Ioka won the first fight against Nietes, but yes, it was very close. Gerardo says Nietes has the heavier hands, I think, but Ioka is no joke either. Growth through calisthenics said that the fix is in. Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised. George Cologne, what's going on? Thanks for coming through, George. Jake Paul is a hard hitter, but needs more skills. You know, he does need more skills, but I have to say, I am impressed with the skills that he's shown up to this point. He's got a decent jab. He's got a rifle of a right hand, and I do think that some of his setups are a little bit tricky. He's got kind of that Danny Garcia thing going where he's got the look low and shoot high. And you see different fighters do it in different ways. Canelo did it beautifully against Amir Khan in knocking him out, you know, where you look to the body, and sometimes you could even drop your shoulders down. You know, you drop your shoulders down and then throw it over the top. It could just totally throw the opponent off, and then before you know it, they clinch up down here, and they're just totally exposed up top. Jake Paul is pretty good at exploiting that. But I'm also impressed with his fight stamina, the fact that he could handle a 5th and 6th round. And it doesn't sound like much, but you know, most professional fighters, even the ones who go on to have great careers, their first several fights sometimes are nothing but 4-rounders and 8-rounders. And to Jake Paul's credit, most of their 5th opponents aren't as good as Hasim Rahman Jr. And you can look at just about any professional fighter, look at their background, look at their first 5 fights, and look at the opponent quality. It's usually pretty atrocious. So, you know, Jake Paul, for having this be his 5th professional fight against somebody who at least has a 12-1 professional record, I don't think that that's anything to really sleep on. I think that the thing that's so shocking and jarring about it is just the fact that he can make every one of these a pay-per-view event. That's where the disconnect is coming in, and that's why a lot of people kind of give it the side eye. Yeah, TJ, Brandon Figueroa, 126 now. Yeah, I think that you probably said that when we were discussing who Ray Vargas's next opponent should be. And yeah, I think that Brandon Figueroa is one of the guys in the front of the line who might get that opportunity. Basil Ottoman, Basil Alotman, and please let me know how to pronounce that in the comments. I want to make sure I get that right. Thanks for coming through, man. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he said salute to the channel, bro. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. Benny Bronx says, Woog, Eddie Hearn is protecting Katie Taylor from Amanda. They don't want the smoke from the Puerto Rican sensation. You know, that first fight was a great fight. That's another one of the fights of the year for 2022. The way I understand it is there's an asking amount that Amanda Serrano is asking for the rematch. And, you know, I think that Eddie Hearn and company, they proposed one amount to Jake Paul and Amanda Serrano. For those of you that don't know, Jake Paul represents Amanda Serrano. So he's also obviously become a pretty influential promoter to some degree. But Amanda Serrano's team, this is what Eddie Hearn is saying, so take it with a grain of salt. But he said that they wouldn't even agree to double what Amanda got paid in the first fight. So it sounds like they want a lot of money, and it sounds like it's more money than Katie Taylor, than, you know, Team Taylor and Team Eddie Hearn Matchroom are willing to pay at this point. So I think that some of that is going on. I do think that there's going to be a rematch somewhere along the way, but I think that Katie Taylor's team is also insisting that the rematch take place in Ireland, which, I mean, I get it, and there would be huge visibility there. And the first fight did take place in Madison Square Garden, you know, where there's obviously a huge Puerto Rican population in NYC. So I think that the rematch will take place. I think that they're both going to just make more money than they were making per fight, respectively, for another fight or two separately before they come back together for another super fight, assuming neither one of them lose. Let's see. TJ said, yo, Woog, I saw your prediction, Garcia versus Fortuna, which, yeah, we will get into Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. Honestly, I don't think it goes 6 rounds. JoJo was touching him too easy. I see Garcia too big and too quick. You might be right with that. You know, look, first of all, if he smokes Javier Fortuna in the first 4 rounds, he will be the first to have ever done that. Yes, Javier Fortuna got stopped late. I think it was like in the 11th round versus Jason Sosa, who we saw Jason Sosa. He was one of the guys who quit on the stool versus Lomachenko when Lomachenko went through that crazy run where he was getting like 3 or 4 fighters to quit on the stool. Nicholas Walters, Guillermo Rigondeaux, Jason Sosa. I did he do it to Mariaga as well? I don't recall. But if Ryan Garcia stops Fortuna early, that would be something to behold. Something about Fortuna's style, though, tells me that he's going to go some rounds. But here is my fear. And you said that you saw the video, so this is probably all a repeat to you. But Fortuna has pretty fast hands, right? And his style can either be a jump into the pocket and ambush style, which is a bad recipe if you're fighting Ryan Garcia, who's got that, just that, in the words of boxing analyst Richard Dwyer, hair trigger, quick, left hook, right? It's just one of those things that happens so fast. You blink, and then you just see the opponent on the floor. And you see the way that, like, you see the Floyd Mayweather fights where the guy even threatens to come in, and then you see Floyd Mayweather go like this, and he's just doing that kind of cat quick thing where even though the guy didn't throw a punch, you saw that Floyd's like body, it was like a natural reaction for Floyd's body to just recoil and then be ready to strike back with the counter. You see Ryan Garcia, when the guy jumps into the pocket, Ryan Garcia will sometimes just twitch. He won't throw it, but he'll twitch because damn sure he's ready to throw it. And so it's a scary thing if you're going to try to keep on collapsing the pocket because, Javier Fortuna is about 5'6.5", which is right around the level since Ryan Garcia is about 5'10", maybe 5'11". So Javier Fortuna's head lines up perfectly with Ryan Garcia's left hook. It could get really bad for Fortuna if he's reckless. And the problem is he is in his 30s. What is he, 33 now? And he doesn't move like he used to. He didn't move to you. What you're saying, he was getting touched too quickly and too easily by Joseph Jojo Diaz, right? Who's a lot shorter than Ryan Garcia. But I feel like he was obliging in fighting a style of fight against Jojo Diaz that I don't think that he's going to try to fight against Ryan Garcia. If he tries to fight that same fight against Ryan Garcia, I think he gets knocked out in pretty short order too. But I think that he's going to be hanging way outside of the pocket, and then I think he's going to look for his opportunities to come in and ambush, which again comes with its own risks. But I feel like after the first few rounds, Ryan Garcia's like timing, not as bad as Mark Magsayo, but I feel like his pursuit gets a little bit predictable, where he doesn't have anything that's going to like really throw you off timing wise, or any wonderful setups that he's going to create those opportunities to let that left hook go. So Javier Fortuna is definitely a veteran, but as we were discussing back when I was talking about Derek Chisora versus Chisora-Pulev 2, you could fool me with the hands. So if you're throwing fast hands, like Javier Fortuna can still throw pretty quickly with the hands. I don't think his upper body movement is as quick as it used to be. His head movement, he's not as elusive, right? But also the legs. Derek Chisora was 38 years old. Pulev was 41 years old when they fought a couple days ago. And you can't fool me with the legs. That's why Chisora keeps on going back into the ropes and kind of standing around and just like saying, no, you come here. I ain't coming over there. You come here. And then you see like Pulev like too slow to get out of the way of Derek Chisora coming in with that two-fisted attack to the body. Like he couldn't avoid those body attacks to save his life. It's because he's 41 years old and he can't move around, can't move quickly, laterally, any of that stuff. I feel like even though, Fortuna's not 38 or 41 years old, he's an old 33 because he's had over 40 professional fights, been in some very difficult, tough fights as well, and plus he started like super young. He's like been boxing his whole life, deep amateur pedigree, all that stuff, right? So with Fortuna, I feel like the legs are going to tell the story, and I don't think that he's going to be able to move around or jump out of the pocket once he gets into the pocket as quickly in rounds, say, 5 through 9 as he might be able to rounds, 1 through 4. So I think that will probably be his undoing. But you say you think it's going to end within 6. I still think that even if Fortuna gets dropped, which I kind of think Fortuna's going to get knocked down, but I think that he's going to get up. I think he's going to start doing all the Fortuna things that we're used to seeing him do. Hold a lot, move around a lot, kind of foul with his forearm and, you know, try to do different roughhouse tactics to make it out of the round and to try to suck up some time and look for opportunities. I think there are going to be some of those clinch situations where you see them both kind of rabbit punching each other. Fortuna's probably going to start the rabbit punching, and then Ryan Garcia is probably going to punch him back. I think you're going to see a lot of that. But I'm still going to give Fortuna the benefit of the doubt, to where I think that his survival tactics, his experience, is going to allow him to survive the 12 rounds. Because he's going to have a decision to make if he can't keep on tagging Ryan Garcia, and if he's not winning a lot of the rounds against Ryan Garcia. Do you still keep putting your foot on the gas to try to pursue Garcia? Because if he does that in the second half of the fight, I think he gets tagged. I think he probably gets dropped and maybe even stopped. Or do you go into, we'll call it Adrian Broner versus Mikey Garcia mode? Or hell, Emmanuel Tego versus Ryan Garcia mode, where you're moving around the ring and you start fighting a survivalist fight. Think Shane Mosley after he got dropped. Old Shane Mosley, you know, old meaning old, not young, but old Shane Mosley against Manny Pacquiao once he got dropped. You know, where you are no longer willing to engage. You don't want to make this a phone booth style fight. You don't want to get into too many dangerous exchanges. You just want to take your money and run at that point. Will Javier Fortuna reach that point in this fight? I think it's kind of possible. And if that's the case, I think he's got enough wherewithal and survival skills to make it out of the dangerous last few rounds, especially if Ryan Garcia is still, you know, throwing with the same velocity that we're going to see him throw in the early rounds. But yeah, to what you were saying, TJ, if he stops him early, then all bets are off in terms of what's next for Ryan Garcia. That would be super impressive. That's really exactly what Ryan Garcia needs right now. And I agree with you. I didn't think Javier Fortuna looked great against Jojo Diaz. Gerardo Reyes said, what do you think about Danny Garcia versus Jose Benavidez Jr. coming up? I'm not super excited about the opponent. I don't think Jose Benavidez Jr. has been the same since he got shot in the leg. You know, he was having issues against Terrence Crawford. Yes, he did make it to the 12th round, but I don't think that he has been the same for the past 4 years. I think Danny Garcia is going to win via decision. I don't love Danny Garcia at 154, and that's actually one of the topics that I wanted to discuss in this one. Is, you know, Danny Garcia, to me, was much more dangerous at 140 than he was at 147. He had detached you from your senses power at 140. And yes, he has knocked out some welterweights. Think Brandon Rios, right? Devastating knockout. But Danny Garcia's got, it's interesting because he's a good boxer, not a great boxer. He's a good puncher. Is he still a great puncher? Will he be a great puncher at 154? Does he have enough of a boxing and quickness, speed advantage over the other guys at 154 to where he's going to be able to have success against the elite fighters at 154? How tall is Danny Garcia? 5'7" or so? I think he's about 5'7". So let's look at, you know, okay, so first of all, I think he beats Jose Benavidez via decision. I will do a preview on that fight as we get closer to the fight date. It's not too far away. But what do you guys think? Does Danny Garcia beat Tony Harrison, who we've now seen fight twice against Jermell Charlo? Does Danny Garcia beat Erickson Lubin, who we just saw get wrecked ultimately by Sebastian Fundora? Does Danny Garcia catch and knock out Sebastian Fundora, the Tornado, at 6'5"? Or what is he? The Cyclone? What's Sebastian Fundora's nickname? But yeah, think about that. Fighting at 154 at 6'5". How does Danny Garcia do against Sebastian Fundora? Given if Sebastian Fundora is kind of, you know, Brandon Figueroa. Do against even a slightly lesser tier fighter like Jason Rosario? That's a good one. How does Danny Garcia do against Jason Rosario, who we saw capture a couple titles by stopping Julian J. Rock Williams and then getting stopped to the body with a jab by Jermell Charlo? How do you guys think Danny Garcia does against Jason Rosario? To me, that would be a good litmus test for Danny Garcia. We learned, this fight against Jose Benavidez Jr., it doesn't tell me anything about Danny Garcia at 154. It tells me whether Danny Garcia is still a good fighter, just period, a good fighter, but Jose Benavidez isn't a 154 guy, so I can't extrapolate too much from Danny Garcia taking up essentially a blown up 147 guy at 154. But yeah, let me know how you think Danny Garcia does against some of those guys I mentioned. TJ said Danny Garcia all day. I think I skipped over it. My bad. Let's see. Danny Garcia all day, even at 154. Very uninterested in that fight, to be honest, as am I. David Benavidez Jr. I like the Adam Kownacki versus versus Ali fight on the undercard better. Wait. So which Ali is Adam Kownacki fighting? And boy, does he need a win. Like some people caught, COVID in 2020, 2021, 22. I feel like Kownacki kept catching Robert Helenius during the COVID era. That was what kept him down. Oh, man. Talk about two fights that just ruined your career. Adam Kownacki went from being undefeated, fighting main events in Brooklyn, his hometown. Brooklyn also has a big Polish population, as does Chicago, by the way. But Adam Kownacki went from being undefeated, kind of a title contender. People wanted to see him against the likes of Deontay Wilder, Luis Ortiz, and guys like that. And then he runs into Robert Helenius, where he's favored heavily. And, I was worried about Adam Kownacki because of how back and forth that fight versus Chris Arreola was. And I'm like, damn, Kownacki gets hit way too much. And it costed him against Robert Helenius both times. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, the Turkish fighter. Yeah, you're right. Demirezin, who's a pretty solid fighter. That is going to be interesting. I don't like the prospects of Adam Kownacki's career going forward. I just feel like there's certain losses, and in this case, back-to-back losses, that could have an irreparable effect. And I think my hunch is that that's what happened with Adam Kownacki. I think he was kind of cutting it close to begin with, just because of his fight style. The fact that he was willing to take one to give one, and it worked up until a point. And I just think that I don't know. I just feel like the bill's due on that one. And I don't think that anybody who's able to hit him and hit him hard is going to be losing to him. Yes, he does still try to walk you down, but yeah, I don't love Adam Kownacki's chances in a lot of these hypothetical matchups going forward. But against Ali, I'm going to take a closer look at this one. I will do a preview on it. I remember now that you mentioned it that it was announced. But, off the top of my head, I don't love Adam Kownacki's chances. I like his chances a lot more than if he was to fight like a top 10, top 15 guy, though. Let's see. I want to get to some of your comments. Yeah, I see some pretty good comments. Ron Sizzle's in the house. Thanks for coming through. Gerardo Reyes. Yeah, I have Danny Garcia via decision over Jose Benavidez Jr. It would bode well for him to get a stoppage there, but I think that one's going to actually go the distance. I think it's going to start looking kind of uneventful where Danny Garcia is cruising, but it's interesting because you would think that if Danny Garcia is cruising, that he's hitting you with hard enough stuff to get you out of there. But I think that it's going to go the distance and be like a 117, 111, maybe even like a 118 to 110 type of scorecard. Let's see. Ron Sizzle 402 thinks that Ryan Garcia is going to go some rounds with Fortuna. Yeah, I think so as well. TJ said Danny Swift Garcia's best days were at 140. Yeah, he was the cream of the crop at 140. He even beat Lucas Matisse on that. Which undercard was it? It was a big-time Floyd Mayweather fight. I just can't remember if it was against Canelo or against somebody else. Yeah, I always like Danny Garcia too. I mean, he seems like a nice guy, you know, and he obviously makes a lot of good financial decisions outside of the ring in his real estate investments and such. So he's not going to need fighting. He doesn't need fighting. He obviously really likes to do it, and I'm sure he gets a rush walking, you know, into the ring and just engaging in some of those fights. But I don't like his chances against a lot of the top guys at 154. I'm just being honest. It's not only because of his 5'7" height, but it's because he wasn't a huge puncher at 147. And he is a technical fighter, but I don't think he's like, he doesn't have any other attribute to me that'll give him a sizable advantage over the 154 guys that'll make up for the size and strength disparity. Let's see. Basil said Ryan's got a long way to go, but is definitely skilled enough to hang with the big dogs. Yeah, Ryan Garcia, I think that his skill's a little bit underrated. I think he does kind of keep his chin out there a little bit too much. I think he's going to get hit with a lot of punches, and I feel like, and this is what Luke Campbell did when he set him up low and went high. I think that that's why I would love to see Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis, because that's truly a fight where either one of them can knock the other one out. But put it like this. I would not like Ryan Garcia's chances against Vasily Lomachenko. I wouldn't. There's some other top guys that I would like his chances against a lot more. I think that I would like Garcia's chances against Devin Haney a little bit more than his chances against Vasily Lomachenko. By the way, is anybody excited about the Teofimo Lopez return? He's about to take on Pedro Campa, which, I mean, I'll do a preview on that one, and I'm not going to get too deep into Pedro Campa's pedigree. Let's just say it's a welcome back type of fight. It's a pretty quality fight, but it's Teofimo Lopez's debut at 140. I would like him to see a lot of the top dogs at 140, and lucky for Teofimo Lopez, who is with Bob Arum top rank, a lot of the best guys at 140 are also fighting on ESPN with Top Rank. So it's going to be interesting to see Teofimo Lopez, what he does, assuming he gets by Pedro Campa, because he has a lot of questions to answer. Was that just an off night, or was it indicative of something else that's been, just troubling Teofimo Lopez over the past couple years, There have obviously been some outside of the ring issues, and he was medically very, very scarily ill, reportedly, in that fight that he lost against George Kambosos. But yeah, I'm really curious as to what Teofimo Lopez shows us as he enters his mid-20s. Keep in mind, he's super young. But we do see a lot of these very promising young fighters' careers get totally derailed, and they never return. They never return to their to the greatness that they attained. In the case of Teofimo Lopez, when he beat Vasily Lomachenko, we see a lot of promising young careers fizzle out. I hope that's not the case with Teofimo Lopez. Let's see. Basil also said Ryan never faced anyone like Tego, who was on the defensive the entire time, which was a great experience for a guy like Ryan, who usually goes straight for the kill. Yeah, if somebody doesn't want to engage with you and doesn't want to fight you, it's hard to just run after them and pursue them recklessly if they are. If any time you take a step forward towards them, they're taking 3 steps back and 2 to the side. Like every time Ryan Garcia said boo, Tego was on the other side of the ring. But he would kind of throw like a ambush haymaker every now and then. But it wasn't any sort of a sustained engagement, which is interesting because if you look at Tego's background, he's actually a pretty good fighter. Yes, a lot of the fights that he won were regional in the country of Ghana, but you look at his fight style, and I just felt like he had more to offer than what he gave us against Ryan Garcia. But I think that he really might have gotten spooked by the hand speed and the power. Ryan Garcia has that in spades, and whatever he's lacking from a sweet science standpoint, from a technical standpoint, I do think that he makes up for in that athleticism. Not in his foot speed or his footwork, but just the hands, the speed and the power that they're coming. It's almost like, I think I said this a couple weeks ago, it's almost like his shoulders are attached to his, to the sockets in different ways than normal people, which allow him to punch with a different type of release, with a different type of velocity. Let's see. TJ said, hell yeah, Garcia, bigger, stronger, faster than Sosa. Jojo Diaz is a 126 pounder that was putting it on him. So yeah, Jojo was a good 126 pounder. His only loss was against Gary Russell Jr., right? So, but then, you know, he had the weight issue because of COVID. He wasn't able to train to cut the weight, to make weight, to defend the title that he won at 130 against Tevin Farmer. He wasn't able to defend that against Shavkat Rakhimov. That they ended up fighting to a draw, but the belt was only up for grabs for Rakhimov because Jojo Diaz blew weight. So then what happened? Then we saw him at 135, right, fighting against Javier Fortuna. So yeah, it's tough to know what to make out of where Jojo Diaz is and what fighting Jojo Diaz means as a litmus test. Like, you know, because we've seen Devin Haney recently fight Jojo Diaz and win a, 117, 111-ish, 118, 110-ish decision. I think there might have even been a 116, 112 maybe scorecard against Jojo Diaz. So we saw him lose to Devin Haney. We saw him beat Javier Fortuna just before that. It's really tough to know how that compares with what we should expect to see from the taller Ryan Garcia against a 5'6.5" Javier Fortuna. That's going to be interesting, though. Let's see. Stan Tucker said he's going to chase Garcia until Garcia catches him. So you think Fortuna's going to be on the front foot trying to jump in, and you think that Garcia's going to be trying to pick him off and is eventually going to, boom, and that's going to either close the show or close to it? I can see that happening. I mean, I feel like you only get so many chances of jumping in against Ryan Garcia before you get blasted. Whether that's going to be like 3 opportunities or 17 opportunities, who knows? But it's almost, you almost get the feeling that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Yeah, TJ said Lamont Roach returns against Alexis Rocha. Alexis Rocha just had a great win. No. I won't call it a great win, but it was a good win against Blair Cobbs. That was when their fight, Cobbs versus Rocha, was elevated to the main event when Virgil Ortiz had to pull out of his fight with Michael McKinson, which they have since rescheduled. But yeah, that's going to be worth watching. Roach versus Rocha. Alexis Rocha is another guy to watch. Like, he's pretty damn good. Like, he's only lost once, and it was to Rashidi Ellis a couple of years ago. But yeah, he's going to be on the come up in short order, Alexis Rocha will. And he fights on DAZN. So there are going to be some, well, the problem with DAZN at 147 is you really only have, like, who do you have? If you're Golden Boy, you've got Virgil Ortiz Jr., there's Alexis Rocha, where Golden Boy is not going to, put Virgil Ortiz Jr. against Alexis Rocha. I don't see them doing that. Maybe you get Golden Boy to work with Eddie Hearn in Matchroom to make perhaps Conor Benn versus Alexis Rocha. I would love to see Oscar De La Hoya propose that fight if Alexis Rocha beats Lamont Roach. And I want to see what Eddie Hearn, what excuse he makes. If he doesn't agree to it, what excuse he makes for Conor Benn. It's probably going to be like, oh, no, we have something bigger in store for Conor Benn or something like that. But I would love to see that 147 fight between Conor Benn and Alexis Rocha, because that one conceivably can happen politically because they both fight on DAZN. Yeah, I agree with you. Growth through calisthenics. Thanks for coming through, man. Once again, thank you. Yeah, he said Danny Garcia ain't making noise at 154. I agree with you. But, the way the PBC ecosystem works, you get the feeling that if Garcia wins this fight, that, I don't know, they're going to find a creative way, I feel, to fast track him. And I don't think they're going to put him up against, like a Tony Harrison or Erickson Lubin. I don't think they will. But I don't know what other back channel or back route he can take to a title shot against Jermell Charlo. So it just feels like 154 is too much of a just too many landmines in the field for Danny Garcia. You're going to have to fight some of these guys. And not to say that Danny Garcia is not down to do it. He's been fighting the best basically throughout his whole career. So I appreciate him for that. I just don't think it's going to go well for him at 154. And I don't think it's going to be like he gets knocked out just cold, cleanly. He's got a very good chin, and he's a very good boxer. But I think we might get a couple situations where he gets beaten up pretty badly, like Jarrett Hurd style. But if he gets stopped, I think it's going to be attrition to where his corner stops. Well, it's tough to picture Danny Garcia's dad, Angel Garcia, stopping the fight, but you know, they might have to at a certain point, depending on who he fights, of course. So yeah, we got about another maybe another 5 to 15 minutes, but I want to definitely get to some more of your comments, and let me see if we missed anything. We definitely so I saw somebody mention Adrian Broner. Yeah, Benny Bronx said Adrian Broner is back. Yeah, and he's going to be fighting against, wait, who's Broner's fighting against? It wasn't, Figueroa. It's going to be against the older brother Figueroa, Omar Figueroa, who, you know, was undefeated for some time. I really thought that he was going to make a lot more noise than he made. You know, he beat an old Robert the Ghost Guerrero, who some of you guys remember fought, you know, Floyd Mayweather, and then kind of appeared to be a shot fighter beyond that point. But I'm trying to think of who the guy Robert Guerrero fought that kind of ruined his career. It was a Japanese fighter, but the name's not coming to me. But it was a blood and guts fight for Robert Guerrero where you were wondering if you would ever see the same Ghost Guerrero. But Omar Figueroa also suddenly came in, and I think it was against Ugas, Yordenis Ugas, and he didn't look like the same Omar Figueroa, did he? He was still undefeated at that point. I think Ugas gave Figueroa, Omar, not Brandon, but his older brother Omar Figueroa, who fights at 147, gave him his first loss. And then since that, he's lost like 1 or 2 more. I know he's lost 1 more, and he looked pretty terrible. Like, he came in, and he was like switching from orthodox to southpaw, like constantly, throwing a whole bunch of creative combinations. But once the guy started opening up and connecting on Omar Figueroa, I think he stopped him like pretty quickly after that, to where it's like, yeah, maybe you just need to hang it up. So, you know, maybe this is the type of fight that Adrian Broner needs, like a fight that he can win. But I don't know. I kind of feel like Broner's going to have to dig deep, and we just haven't seen good moments from Adrian Broner lately. Even in the fight that he controversially won against a much less than top tier opponent, Broner didn't look good there. And his punch output, like his volume, always left a lot to be desired. Like, you always wanted to see Adrian Broner throw more punches, especially everything after that. It was probably his most significant win. It was a title win against you know what, I actually want to pull this one up, because it was a win where he hit this guy. This is before he moved up a couple weight classes to fight Marcos Maidana, but he had hit this guy with everything but the kitchen sink before getting him out of there. This might have been his last fight at 130 or 135. It was against Antonio DeMarco. That's where Adrian Broner won the WBC lightweight title. So I feel like ever since that, you know, because he fought Paulie Malignaggi. Check 1 2. Are we still live? Like, my phone just cut out, and I'm not sure if we lost volume and all of the above. But yeah, all that to say, let me know if I went on mute, guys. And by the way, shout out to Benny Bronx, who answered the question about Sebastian Fundora's nickname. Yeah, Towering Inferno. Let me know. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, we're good. Yeah, thank you. But my early thoughts on Broner versus Figueroa is, I think Broner... Wow, like, how shot is Figueroa? How shot is Figueroa? Because the one thing about Adrian Broner is that he's always had an exceptional chin. Not a good chin, but an exceptional chin. You know, he made it out of that fight against Mikey Garcia, which, by the way, was supposed to be like a 50-50 pick'em fight. But my early thoughts are that Broner pulls off a decision win against Omar Figueroa. Even though Figueroa is going to be the one applying the pressure, I'm picking Adrian Broner with on that one. Jay Foreman's in the house. Yeah, thanks for coming through. Yeah, imagine if Teofimo loses again at this new weight. Yeah, that would be pretty disastrous. You know, if he gets back on on a winning streak, then it'll look like he just had a bad night. But yeah, he can't afford to lose this comeback fight, especially against a guy like Pedro Campa. Do I think Ruiz Jr. stops Luis Ortiz, TJ? I kind of do. I'm definitely going to do a preview on that one, and I'm super glad they made this fight. It's a couple years too late, in my opinion, but I do think Andy Ruiz Jr. stops Luis Ortiz. I would have thought differently a couple years ago. Luis Ortiz is just now like 40-something years old. And once, Ruiz starts connecting with you, he keeps connecting with you. And, Luis Ortiz wasn't looking great versus Charles Martin before he knocked him out. So, yeah, I think that this might be the one where Luis Ortiz is finally, losing to somebody not named Deontay Wilder. And I think that there's a good chance that Ruiz can stop him. Hand speed kills. If the other guy can't do anything about getting hit by it, hand speed kills. But I also think that there are going to be moments in that fight where Luis Ortiz tags Ruiz Jr. with his straight left hand. A couple more minutes before we're out. Are you guys gonna? Okay, so let me see. I would just want to make sure I didn't leave anything out. There were a couple comments made by Mayweather. I want to talk just a minute about Floyd Mayweather's comments about Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson. He basically said that they need to fight each other, that them fighting each other would be one of the biggest fights in the sport. To me, that was promoter talk for you guys make the pot bigger, fight each other. You guys take the difficult fights that Team Gervonta Davis hasn't taken on yet. You guys sort that out. So that when we do eventually collide, that there's much more money on the table, and Gervonta Davis doesn't have to fight, multiple A+ level fighters. He doesn't have to fight or A level, A+ level fighters. He doesn't have to fight Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson. He just has to fight whoever wins between them. So yeah, I wasn't too happy to hear that Mayweather comment. It was disguised to be a compliment. And I do think that Floyd Mayweather thinks highly of both Haney and Shakur Stevenson. He's trained a bunch with both of them. They both trained in the Mayweather gym. His dad, Floyd Mayweather Sr., used to train Devin Haney. Floyd Mayweather was trying to sign Shakur Stevenson coming out of the Olympics. Shakur Stevenson instead went with Bob Arum, Top Rank. But Floyd Mayweather, you could see around that time, they were taking a bunch of pictures together. Floyd Mayweather and company were definitely courting Shakur Stevenson in the hopes of signing him. So I think Mayweather definitely respects both. But to me, that was just promotional. That was just promoter talk for saying, yeah, Tank Davis ain't about to fight Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson. That's what I got out of that. Benny Bronx said the takeover, that's Teofimo Lopez's tagline, nickname. The takeover is back. I'm a fan. Yeah, I like Teofimo Lopez. He was really an easy guy to root for. Even with some of the over-the-top personality, I dig it. Like his backflips, his Heisman pose. I mean, there was a lot to get excited about. Plus the way that he just delivered when the chips were down against Richard Comey. Like I wasn't sure how that fight was going to go down. That was a huge step up for Teofimo at the time, especially after seeing him in that difficult fight with Nakatani. I wasn't sure how Teofimo versus Comey was going to go down, and then he just obliterates him in the way that he did. I mean, and then to deliver against Lomachenko in the way that he did, like the guy has a ton of belief and he executes. So yeah, I would definitely like to see him get way back on track. Let's see. Yeah, growth through calisthenics. Tio was dealing with some personal issues, but he was you said he was compromised mental state mentally against Kambosos, but the same applied in that Nakatani fight. He was saying that right before he entered the ring that there was like a domestic fight. It was like between his family and his either fiance or wife or something. Like this has been like an ongoing thing for Teofimo Lopez. Multiple fights. This has been the case. Yeah, TJ, Alexis Rocha is legit. You want to see Conor Benn versus Blair Cobbs? Okay, yeah, that would be a good one too. Even though I do think that Conor Benn is kind of a real dude. I think that he's good, man. I didn't think that he was going to handle his last couple fights as easily as he did. I'm actually more a believer in Conor Benn than I think a lot of people are. Blair Cobbs a little less so. I mean, he's not a terrible fighter, but he had no business headlining that card. I mean, and it was because, again, of an injury and because of his personality, Blair Cobbs' personality, why he was even headlining that card, right? Before we get out of here, I do want to bring some attention to. I'm going to try to do a show tomorrow. It's going to be a collab with my boy Robert Reese. He's got a channel called Hot Facts with Robert Reese. He was in the house a little bit earlier. We're going to go on. I believe I'm going to put a post out, but it should be 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to be talking boxing. We're always going to keep it boxing. And we're still messing with the name, but we're basically piloting a, perhaps like a once a week thing. We'll see how it goes, week by week, but he is somebody I love to talk boxing with. Me and him go way back, so we're going to give it a shot at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We're still obviously going to do this Tuesday live chat every week. And I'm going to, keep on cranking out the previews and recaps and boxing talk, but we are going to give this, we're thinking about maybe calling it like the box office or something. We're still playing with some names, but yeah, that's going to go down tomorrow, 5 p.m. Let's see. I want to make sure that I get to as many of these as I can. Maidana versus Porter in a dream fight. Basil asked, who do I have winning? A hypothetical fight between Marcos Maidana and Sean Porter. Whoo, that's a tough one. But I'm going to go with Sean Porter via close, controversial maybe, but a close decision. Like a split decision, majority decision win for Sean Porter over Marcos Maidana. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going with that one. But man, Maidana's a dangerous puncher. It's those angles too. He's got like that corkscrew thing where he kind of turned it over. It was a little like a Golovkin, but not quite. It was its own thing. And if you see the way that it connected with like Amir Khan, the way that it connected with, it's crazy that Devin Alexander beat Maidana in the way that he did. But in the way that it also connected with Adrian Broner, obviously, it was just in the way that he connected with Floyd Mayweather in 2 different fights. He's a very interesting style, a lot to grapple with. But I think that Sean Porter's work rate is going to be a lot for Maidana to deal with. Yeah, I think that Sean Porter wins with the work rate, basically. Because again, Devin Alexander at his best beat Marcos Maidana. And I think that Sean Porter basically made his first splash beating Devin Alexander for the belt, for that IBF welterweight belt. So yeah, I would go Porter in a close fight. Yeah, Jay Foreman, he said, I got into the chat late, but maybe you spoke on this. What did I think about Magsayo versus Vargas? Who do I see? Oh, no, that fight took place last weekend. I don't know if you're being facetious, but yeah, no, that fight took place last weekend. Do you want me to spoil it for you? If you haven't seen it, I actually urge you to go to check it out, and then we'll circle back and talk about it. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. But yeah, guys, thanks once again for coming through and for letting a lot of your commentary, your questions, your insight. You guys are obviously you guys are boxing fans like I'm a boxing fan. So I love doing this every Tuesday. I just kicked out a Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna preview. Check that out when you get a chance. I also did a early thoughts video. I had done an early thoughts video on Canelo versus Triple G3 a few days ago. And then, earlier today, this morning, I think. This week has been weird, but I think it was this morning. I did one on early thoughts video on Usyk versus AJ 2, Anthony Joshua 2. So check that out if you get a chance. The next one that I'm doing is, or the next preview that I'm doing is a little bit less eventful, but Dwight Gonzalez will be fighting Isaac Dogboe, not this coming weekend, but next weekend. So I'm going to do a preview for that, probably release it sometime this weekend. But also, if I can, I want to hop on and maybe do a recap on the fight taking place early tomorrow morning between Ioka and Nietes. I'm probably going to speak a little bit about that if I can. If Boxing Wave does a live chat early tomorrow morning, I might hop in there. So if you guys are up at that time and you guys want to see some good boxing and listen to some commentary as well, Ioka versus Nietes, that's early tomorrow morning, and I just might jump into that Boxing Wave channel. One more thing that I want to just briefly touch on. Well, a couple things before we get out of here. Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu. It looks like it's not going to take place until January 2023, and I think it's because Tim Tszyu suffered a broken hand. I'm not 100%, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu might not take place until January 2023. That feels like a long time from now, doesn't it? So it's like, don't hold your breath. If Jermell Charlo could have gotten one more fight in between, that'd be great, but, I get it. And I'm surprised that the mandatories haven't been a lot more emphatic about saying, no, fight our mandatory. So, okay. I would have loved to have seen Jermell Charlo fight again, though, in 2022. Dimitri Bivol versus Zurdo Ramirez was just ordered by the WBA. So that is going to be Dimitri Bivol's next title defense, unless they, paid Zurdo Ramirez step-aside money to what? Fight Buatsi? That doesn't make any sense. So, Canelo's not going to be fighting Bivol next. And Bivol doesn't have the luxury of just saying, no, I'm not going to fight you at all. He would have to give up his title to not fight Zurdo at this point. So it looks like we're about to get Dimitri Bivol versus Zurdo Ramirez. So I can't wait to, weigh in on this one and discuss this with you guys, like, in the coming weeks. Like, that's going to be a good one. Zurdo's been looking very impressive at 175. He was a belt holder for quite some time. With a few title defenses at 168. He wasn't a knockout artist at 168. It's been interesting because up at 175, he's been knocking guys out. He's been looking big, right? Just physically big at 175. So I'm very curious to see how a Dimitri Bivol versus Zurdo Ramirez fight plays out. Can't wait to take a deeper dive into that one. And then it looks like Bam Rodriguez versus Israel Gonzalez was just added to the Canelo versus Triple G3 undercard. No, Israel Gonzalez isn't the opponent that any one of us would have wanted to see Bam Rodriguez fight, but look how quick the turnaround is. This is almost like when Canelo came back to fight Abner Yildirim between the Callum Smith and the Billy Joe Saunders fight. So I'm not mad at Bam Rodriguez, who just beat Carlos Cuadras, then stopped Sarisaket Sor Rungvisai to then come back a couple months later to fight Israel Gonzalez. That's good for Bam. They're keeping him busy, and I mean, the future's so bright for that kid. I just love what he can potentially do for these lower weight classes. But yeah, my bad if I didn't get to any of your guys' comments. I tried to get to as many of them as possible. Yeah, Jay Foreman said, I think Ruiz, he said, TJ, I think Ruiz stops Ortiz. How old is Ortiz now? Close to 50, right? Yeah, it's allegedly, I think, 42. But, sometimes with fighters, sometimes from the DR, Dominican Republic, in baseball, they say that sometimes the age could be fudged, or in this case, from the country of Cuba, that, some people just aren't buying it until they see Luis Ortiz's birth certificate, which, sometimes, in a lot of countries, birth certificates just aren't readily available. So you would scale your age down for better opportunity. So, we think that Luis Ortiz is around 42 years old, but nothing has been confirmed nor denied. But, yeah, he's 40 plus. So, yeah, I tend to think Ruiz has the upper hand in this one. But I'm still super glad that this fight is getting made. Yeah, you're right. Benny Bronx. Xander Zayas is fighting on that Teofimo Lopez versus Pedro Campa undercard. He's fighting against Espadas. So that's gonna be good. Xander Zayas, by the way, is one of those, up-and-coming prospects who you need to keep your eye on. Very skilled, technical fighter. Almost to the point where I think it might even work against him at some point. Because sometimes non-hardcore boxing fans get a little bored with guys who show too much technique, like Devin Haney or something. But Xander Zayas is a sweet scientist to the core. So keep your eye on him. I think that we're definitely going to see a lot of him. Remember the name, Xander Zayas. Heck yeah. But yeah, thanks a lot once again for joining us for another one of these live chats. Can't wait to do this next Tuesday. I will be doing another couple videos before the end of the week. Again, tomorrow we're doing a live chat. Me and my boy Robert Reese, Hot Facts with Rob Reese. We're gonna get busy at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific time to talk some boxing. We're gonna go. We're gonna basically give off the cuff our top 5 in a few different divisions, all-time top 5. Even though I would say. And Rob, we'll talk about this off air, but we were looking at heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, top 5s, right? But I'm thinking I almost want to do it like from 1970 on, or maybe for the heavyweight division, 1960 on, and then for the other divisions, 1970 on, or maybe 65 on, or something like that, because sometimes when we're giving our top 5s or the greatest of all time in whatever respective division, we aren't paying proper attention to the 30s, 40s, 50s, or even before that. I mean, I get why. I get, it takes a lot of research, but there are a lot of guys that I don't want to sleep on. The Willie Peps, if you will, the Gene Tunneys, if we're talking, heavyweights and stuff. You guys see my dog, Ava, in the back. She's ready to go outside too, I'm sure. But yeah, tomorrow we're going to talk heavyweight, top 5 all time, light heavyweight, middleweight, and welterweight, top 5s for each. And again, I think I might want to put a cap and say maybe 1970 and on. Thank you once again. Benny Bronx in the house. Thanks for coming through. Hot Facts with Robert Reese. Thanks. Heck yeah, and we're going to talk for sure. Jay Foreman, thank you as always, man. Basil Alotman, thank you. TJ, thank you for coming through. Stan Tucker, a.k.a. Dad, thanks for coming through. Growth through Calisthenics, thanks for coming through once again. Heck yeah. Yeah, these are always fun. And like, I learn a lot through the comments and through the comments that you leave on some of the videos that I've done. I read those. I try to respond to as many of them as I can. And I like, going back and forth, theorizing on some of these fighters, some fight styles, some matchups, some, who's ducking who and so forth. I like it all. Gerardo Reyes, thanks for coming through. Once again, Ron Sizzle 402. Yeah, until next time, guys. Appreciate you guys. And by the way, I almost feel wrong for not signing off the way that I do on all the videos. What was it? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm Wood. Thanks for tuning in. But peace, y'all.